Good evening and welcome to the seventh session of the History Matters series presented by Isothermal Community College Library. Our program tonight is entitled Textile Memories, the Rise and Fall of Textiles in Rutherford County. Now, for many years, the textile industry was the mainstay of the economy in Rutherford County. Tonight, we will be hearing from two wonderful speakers. Our first speaker will cover the beginning of textiles in Rutherford County, focusing on the mill villages and the Haynes and Tanner families. And then our second speaker will cover the last 20 years of operation for cone mills in Rutherford County, from the time the mills had their very best years in business to the declining and closing of operations. He will focus on the people employed, the customers served, and the community involvement. It's my privilege to introduce our first speaker for the evening, Mr. Philip White. Mr. White is a native of Forest City. He graduated from Cool Springs High School and earned his associate's degree in history from Gardner-Webb, and then received his bachelor's degree in history from Carson Newman College in 1966 and was employed as a 7th grade teacher at Cliffside Elementary School. In 1968, the Rutherford County Schools administrative officers recommended him for the prestigious Experienced Teacher Fellowship at the University of Tennessee, a pilot program that was designed to prepare teachers for administrative positions in the local school unit. Mr. White was one of 20 recipients selected nationwide to participate in this program, and after he graduated in 1969, he had earned his Master's of Arts degree in Educational Administration. He remained as principal of Cliffside Elementary School for 36 years. He did additional studies and earned his EDS from Appalachian State University, and also completed the Principal's Executive Program from the University of North Carolina. Mr. White's firm but compassionate administrative style earned him the respect of his school community and helped mold his students into people of character who became successful adults and good citizens. Mr. White was inducted into the Rutherford County Schools Education Hall of Fame in 2019. Mr. White has had a lifelong interest in history, and he's a member of the Rutherford County Historical Society and a member and past president of the Cliffside Historical Society. He and his wife Alpha live in Cliffside, and they have 2 children, Jana and David. Mr. White, it's a privilege to introduce you and welcome you to the podium.
Thank you, Chevis. With that introduction, you're going to get a load. It's good to be here, and it says the rise and fall. I'm going to go way back before there was any textile development. And I'm going to follow the life of 2 gentlemen who were born close together, and they led a similar lifestyle growing up and had different experiences until their paths crossed one day, and we get into what the topic of the seminar is. From the beginning, the history of textile development in Rutherford County began with the rise of a small group of men who grew up in the years prior to the Civil War. and they became young adults during Reconstruction. The county, Rutherford County, missed the battle scars, but felt the economic ravages of war. Basically, things were still the same, a static rural county with even less than before the war. There were a few grist mills scattered about, but beyond that, what living the people made, they scratched out of the soil. They had little wealth or little formal education, and their character and enterprise led them to accomplish greater things. Raleigh Rutherford Haynes and Simpson Bobo Tanner were such men. R. Haynes, I'll call them all kind of names tonight because those names are hard to say. R. Haynes was born June the 30th, 1851 in the Ferry settlement of Rutherford County. Google that and see if it gives you directions. All right, I knew you didn't know where it was. So, Ferry, birthplace of R. Haynes. It's right outside Cliffside. Ferry Road. Ferry Road came right through his property and went down, and there was a ferry across Broad River. One of the main routes to South Carolina. South Carolina all the way to Charleston was a big trade route. So he, fortunate or unfortunate, he was born along a superhighway, you might say. I'll show you a picture of it in a minute. His father, Charles Hodge Haynes, was a farmer. He owned 200 acres of land. He served as a deputy sheriff, and he had taught school. His mother, Sarah Walker Haynes, was Sarah Walker Haynes. They had 8 children. He was born in that house. That's a log cabin inside. Raleigh's daddy weatherboarded inside and out. The cabin has been restored, the log part, and it's now in Cliffside. Been moved from the Ferry community. Remember where that is now? We call it the Chase community now, but it was originally the Ferry community. Raleigh's father died at the age of 35. Raleigh was only 7 years old. Being the oldest son, he was expected to be in charge of the farm. His mother was religious and led the children to read the Bible and attend church. She instilled in them the principles of character building. An older sister and younger brother were taught to read by the older sister, along with Raleigh. The father had taught the daughter, so they could read at an early age. They also attended a community school close by for a couple of months during when it wasn't farming time, planting or harvesting. Therefore, R always valued education and learning. He had responsibilities on the farm, and as a young boy, he looked after the family milk cow. He led the cow out every morning to good grass. And one day, the cow pulled up the picket pen and wandered off in search of better grazing. Raleigh had to follow the path of the cow and finally found that old cow near the Second Broad River, near a roaring waterfall. Curious, he went through brush to the edge of the river and saw the falls. He remembered this site on the side of a cliff and its possibilities. After several years of working the farm, he thought about different crops that could be grown as a cash crop. He had heard about cotton, but no farms he knew of in his community grew it. He would have to go farther south to find farms where cotton was grown in volume. In 1871, at the age of 20, he and his younger brother and sister, they took her for cook and housekeeper, went to Union County, South Carolina to farm and learn about growing cotton. They would stay from March through July. come home, then return in late fall for the harvesting. Their first crop yielded 9 bales of cotton. That's 9 times 480 pounds. So that's a pretty good crop by hand, plowing and everything. They worked the farm for 2 years before returning to Ferry with new farming knowledge to share with local farmers who also wanted a cash crop. In 1874, 23-year-old Raleigh married Amanda Carpenter. They would eventually have 8 children, 4 boys, 4 girls. Raleigh partnered with several men in the community and built a sawmill and cotton gin to serve the many farmers who were now growing cotton. He also built a store at Ferry and began to purchase parcels of land nearby. The land around the area of the abandoned High Shoal Iron Works was available and cheap. The shoals had provided a large volume of water to power the iron forge located there early in the 1800s. He bought this land and the high shoals, this area right here. S.B. Tanner was born on December the 8th, 1853, at Hurricane Shoals near what is now Clifton, South Carolina. His father, Andrew, came to this area in Clifton from Rutherford County in 1841, and he found work in the local iron works. Eventually becoming an iron master. The proprietor of the iron works was Simpson Bobo. He was a man of means and much influence in public affairs. Andrew worked for this proprietor for 30 years and really respected him. Therefore, when he had a son, he named him Simpson Bobo Tanner. Little is known about Simpson's early years, and while no records exist of his attending any formal school, he was considered very bright and inquisitive. He did take a 2-week handwriting course as a teenager. Legible handwriting would be important in the business world and in recording accurate information. Moving to Union, South Carolina, the 18-year-old was offered a job as clerk at McNally's Mercantile Store. This position would be, we'd love to have this job today. His position, offered this position to him as a clerk in this store. His hours, daylight to 2 hours after dark, but he is compensated with a bed that he could sleep in the store. He could take his meals with the store family, and for that short period of work, he was offered a salary of $100 per year, payable on New Year's Day. If you worked the second year, you'd get an additional $100. Every year, you added $100. So that tells you, he took that job. Money was scarce. He worked at that job for 3 years, saving his salary to collect a stake for future investment. His friends there started calling him Simps. Simps left McNally's in 1873 and used his stake to pay tuition at Bryant and Stratton Business College in Baltimore. Founded in 1858, this was an American innovation, typically having courses in business practices, bookkeeping, and office practices. Now, instruction was based on mock stores where they had freight office, a bank, had insurance sales and so forth, They had wholesaling, discounting. Then they had a post office right here. Study tables. It's a pretty neat situation. Looks a lot like Isothermal started out. So, attending only 3 months at Bryant and Stratton, and they're still in business. By the way, some of their alumni include, you probably haven't heard of any of them. Henry Ford, John D. Rockefeller, R.J. Reynolds, and S.B. Tanner. They're still in business. They have a chain of them. Attending only 3 months at Bryant and Stratton, Simpson returned to Charlotte in 1874. His father was now involved as a railroad building contractor with the Carolina Central Railroad. He had a temporary office while building the railroad from Charlotte to Wadesboro and needed a clerk. And Simpson took this position. Now, my railroad buddy Bruce Byers is in the audience. He also went on, Bruce, to help build the Saluda grade. If you know about railroading, you know of Saluda grade, the steepest grade in the United States, just about, isn't it? At least in the East. Within a few short months, Ellison Cohen, a large mercantile supply wholesaler in Charlotte, hired him as a clerk, and his salary would be $30 a month. And Tanner thrived from the beginning in this position, and his value was quickly realized by his employers, who raised his salary to $50 retroactive. He never made 30, he made 50 or more from there on. From that job, he used business connections through businessmen that would come in, and he would serve as a clerk selling merchandise and so forth, to use this position as a business connection with the power brokers of Charlotte. As he became well known himself, he began to be noticed by several of these men. One individual was J.S. Spencer. J.S. picked able young businessmen to monitor in banking and financial matters. Well, after a while of counseling and so forth, the business connections soon became social occasions, and Simpson was invited into the Spencer home frequently for discussions and meals. Now, Mr. Spencer had a young daughter, Lola, and although 14 years younger, she and Simpson would marry in 1886. Now, Ellison Cohen, the wholesaler establishment, utilized a sales force of salesmen or drummers who traveled by horse and buggy throughout much of the Carolinas, calling on country stores. Now, we're back to this picture. This is really the Haynes store, the real deal, right there. This is the Ferry Road that I was telling you about, thoroughfare. This is a horse and buggy down here, and it's one of the salesman buggies. And I'd like to believe that Simpson Tanner is calling on the store. You know about country stores and so forth from TV and movies. That was a center of activity in a community. A lot of times the post office would be in the country store. They carried whatever the supplies, wasn't necessarily groceries, horse collars, horse shoes, or seed, or whatever, just an assortment. And these drummers, they made their money by taking orders. The store owner would send wagons to Charlotte to get the goods a couple times a year. But you didn't want a salesman, and you still don't today, who wants to sell you a product and talks you into it, and it stays on your shelf forever and nobody wants that product. So S.B. Tanner was the type of salesman that when he went out on the road from Ellison Cohen, he knew the farmers, what they needed. He knew the store owners, how they would push certain things. So both sides made money. After leaving inside the clerk's office, the way he got the job, keeping the books, he found out really fast that the drummers made more money than the ones working in the store. So he was after the raise in pay. So he requested from Elias and Cohen to go on the road as a drummer. They liked his bookkeeping and working in the store. But finally, after a few years, they let him go on the road as a drummer. And this Ferry Road Haynes store was on his route. His counties from Charlotte included Rutherford, Polk, and Henderson counties. Now, he wasn't the only drummer, just like other salesmen come into stores. In addition to Tanner calling on Haynes in the Haynes store, were the Cohen brothers from Baltimore. They ran a wholesale grocery business. Everyone was fine-tuning cotton at that time, and here's why. Cotton was the currency of the region. The crop size and condition determined the farmer's credit, and the country store would advance credit for the year against the anticipated harvest value of the cotton crop. Merchants had to be good judges of cotton and farmers. Tanner sought advice from a former merchant who had gone into manufacturing, John H. Montgomery. You heard that name? Major textile man. He built Spartanburg, just about several mills, and gained new insight about the more profitable possibilities of cotton. After working for Ellison Cohen for 12 years, Simps finally had a sizable stake to invest. He quit his job. Now, Tanner and Haynes had similar ideas about investing in cotton manufacturing. They would partner in the textile venture. Now, Raleigh had been purchasing land in the area and had recently bought the land and site of the old iron furnace at High Shoals. He put up this property valued at $10,000. Tanner added $10,000 of his stash. And his future father-in-law at this time, J.S. Spencer, put in $10,000. It surprised him when business friends in Charlotte quickly raised $90,000. They were going on the character of the investors. They believed what they had done in the past and they would do it now. Man's word is his bond type thing. So, beginning in 1885, land was being cleared, roads laid out, a dam constructed, a large brick mill structure was begun, tenement houses, store, office, and a bridge were built. R.R. Haynes supervised the outside construction of tenement houses and clearing, as well as purchasing additional land. S.B. Tanner supervised the building of the mill and installing of machinery. The new mill went into production in 1887 and was named Henrietta. Or if you want to, we're among friend Henrietta. So, in honor of Tanner's now mother-in-law, Henrietta Spencer, this mill was profitable from the beginning. Now, Lessons learned. Long time getting there, you think, from 1851, 1853, or 54, the date of S.B. Tanner's birth is unknown. Some say 1853, some say 1854. They learned things from this venture, and they figured they had worked out a formula for success, big success, because they learned that the villages were built in a single operation and populated all at once, because they were in a wilderness. There wasn't anything there, so they had to build everything. But they saw that that was the way to do it. And modern technology, think about the times now, right after the Civil War. Modern technology was bringing a pre-industrial people into the industrial age. And these people were bringing Rutherford County into it also. With the success of Henrietta in 1895, they moved 1 mile up the river and built an additional mill and village and named it Caroline in honor of Tanner's mother, Caroline Cannon Tanner. Now, they pronounced her name as Caroline, L-I-N-E, but they pronounce it Caroline. I Googled that name, or I'm typing out the thing here, and you know how you'll spell a word or something and it underlines it, it defers to another word. I typed in Caroline and it popped out Caroline. Side note. Henrietta, Caroline. They also went up 1892 into Forest City. Built another big mill, named it Florence, after Raleigh's oldest daughter, Florence Haynes. R.R. Haynes and Simpson Bobo Tanner were independent visionaries. They had joined talents and resources to realize individual ambitions. They both now had the personal capital to chart their own course. Their partnership dissolved. Haynes looked 2 miles south on the Second Broad River as the perfect site to build his mill village and ideal village. He would later name it Cliffside. Tanner looked to the northwest section of Rutherford County to build his dream, which he later named Spindale. Key point here, above profit, they both desired the satisfaction of building, of creating, of erecting a great structure where nothing was before. Now, Tanner moved on to new projects. In 1906, he purchased the Cleghorn Mill in Rutherford and later organized the Green River Mill in Tuxedo. That's in Henderson County. After the coming of electricity, it was no longer necessary to build mills on rivers. New mills, the Spencer in 1916, the Parsley in Tanner, and a new Cleghorn soon followed. These 3 mills were built on land purchased about 2.5 miles east of the town of Rutherford. Within a few years, another 5 mills would be built. Spindale Mills, the Elmore Corporation, Stonecutter, Spinner's Processing, and Sterling Hosiery. It was S.B. Tanner who chose the name Spindale as a whimsical derivation of spindle. Now, Kenneth Spencer Tanner, the oldest son of S.B. Tanner, had worked closely with his father on all these projects. He had managed many of the tasks involved in getting the new textile plants operational and assumed leadership of the Tanner's group of textile mills following the death of S.B. Tanner in July of 1924. Now, Hugh Moore, friend, spoke for many who grew up in Spindale when he said, paraphrase this, "There's a lot of pride in recognizing the values and work ethic we possess. These were instilled by very good, hard-working people." That's the general sentiment of most mill villages. Now, Raleigh never forgot the horseshoe bend in the Second Broad River where, what did he lose? He lost the cow. Went looking for that cow. And this would be the place to build a textile mill in town, he said. He would name it Cliffside. Now he would have complete control in what kind of town to build. It would be his ideal town, and he could help provide whatever people needed to maintain a high level of life. It would be a complete town having a harmonious community, pursuing happiness in the fear of God. Work started in clearing the wilderness. This is a real picture of work down there. I didn't grab that off of something. They had to build a road because they just had walking paths and horse paths into the area they were going to build on. So it's a major deal at all these places. I would like to hover around sometime in another life and see how they built those mills with the blocks and tackles and whatever they had. I guess Noah built his ark, so he used something way back. So maybe they got some ideas from Noah. The dam construction began in 1899, followed by the mill building. This is an artist's sketch of what it's going to look like. Machinery was installed, and when the mill building was completed, the first cloth was produced in 1902. At that time, Cliffside Mill was the largest gingham mill in the South. I was going to talk to Mr. Hines here just a minute. If you notice up here at the top, it says it had 1,500 looms. That's a pretty good bunch of looms. The town grew and prospered. Churches and the school was built. Raleigh Rutherford Haynes died suddenly on February the 6th, 1917. Many of his planned building projects and plans for the town were left undone. His son, Charles H. Haynes, was elected president of Cliffside Mills. He had lived in close association with his father and went about with conscientious care the great projects left him. Haynes Mill and the town of Avondale were under construction in 1916 and completed by Charles H. Haynes. There was also construction in 1922 of the Cliffside School. And the same year, the R. Haynes Memorial Building were completed under the direction of Charles H. Now, the mill towns of Rutherford County continued to grow and prosper up through the next several decades. Many of you grew up in mill towns. Cliffside. Today, if you took this same picture, the church and a couple of these warehouses, the only thing in that picture that's still standing, everything else, houses, everything's gone. So, things happen. Everything has a life. There's always a cliffside connection. I'll back up. Raleigh, his son Walter, and then his great-grandson, Walter. You didn't know he was out of one of the Textile Baron families, did you? But, as happens in all things, the decline and end of the mills and company town was imminent.
Tonight it's my privilege and honor to introduce to you Terry Hines. Terry is currently serving as Executive Director of the RHI Legacy Foundation. He's a graduate of Chase High School in 1972, has a BS in Business Administration from Lander College. He was employed by Cone Mills for 30 years, with his last position being Vice President of Rutherford County Operations. And following the closing of the Rutherford County cone plants, Terry was employed as Supply Chain Director for Tanner Companies for 4 years. Terry's participated in many community and volunteer organizations here in the county. He's currently a McNair mentor. He is previously been working at Cone and Tanner. Terry participated as a United Way volunteer and delivered meals through Rutherford County Senior Center, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. And I'll just interject here that at Cone Mills, Rutherford County and the community of Cliffside never knew all the things that Terry did for that community, and that's the way he wanted it. But there are so many things that he did for the community that nobody will ever really know all the behind-the-scenes things that he did. Over the years, Terry has served as a board member for Isothermal Community College, for Isothermal Community College Foundation, Robert and Janice McNair Educational Foundation, Rutherford Regional Hospital System, Rutherford Regional Health System, and United Way. Terry and his wife Kathy, who's here tonight, they still live in the Cliffside community. Kathy is a retired teacher from Chase Middle School. Also, Terry's daughter Allison's here tonight, and Cindy, his sister. And also Terry has a son, Lucas, of Charlotte. And I know we don't want to run too long, but I just thought about this. This is the only opportunity I'm probably ever going to have to introduce Terry Hines. I've not had an opportunity before now, and I'm seriously doubting I'll ever have another one. So I just want to take a moment to personally say how much impact he's had on my life, how much I appreciate him. Just quickly, I remember at Cone, I had just recently gone into the role of a department manager, and Terry came through the department one day, and we were just standing there talking, and so this is what he told me, and I've never forgot it. He said, Mark, when you leave this department, you need to be able to come back, and others need to be able to come back years down the road and look in this department and see your legacy, see your handprints on this department. And I'm going to tell you, Terry's legacy is everywhere in Rutherford County. It's not just at Cone Mills, but it's everywhere in Rutherford County. And you can go through and see his handprints and see his legacy. And so, Terry, appreciate that very much. And I give you this time to Mr. Terry Hines.
I don't think I need to say anything after hearing Mark speak about that and also, but thank you, Mark, for the comments. Let's give Mr. White another round of applause. That's a great presentation there. When Kathy asked if I would do this, she talked about it being a textile reunion, and I said, well, with the textile industry going through what it did, it'd be kind of hard to think of us coming together and speaking about things that we're talking about and think about it as a reunion. But I look around the room, and it is for us because there's a lot of us in here that work together at Cone, and it was a great time for all. I want to start out a little bit before I started to work. If you recognize the person on the left side in this picture, this is 1967. Y'all recognize Mr. Philip White? You think Mr. White and I don't have a long relationship? You see the littlest fella right beside him? That's Terry Hines. So we got started a long time ago, and we've had a lot of fun and a lot of things that have gone on. This here is not a commercial for Mr. Clean. This is to tell you about a person that had a big impact on me and made a statement that was very prophetic that impacted me in later years. I think the people from Cone recognize when I say who Mr. Clean was to us at Cone. It was a gentleman by the name of Mr. Taylor Moser. He was the president of our company, and in 1978, I was named as department manager of the card room at the Cliffside yarn plant. Mr. Moser had a habit or a characteristic that he would come and greet a new department head either when they began their first day of work or during their first week of work. And I'd heard about it, but I didn't really expect that it would happen. So I came in the first morning to go to work as department head of the card room. Clyde Clark was third shift supervisor, met me at the door, and he said, Terry, Mr. Clean's in your office. And I said, he is? He said, yeah. And I thought he was kidding with me. So I go walking down, get to the office, and there sat Mr. Moser. Mr. Moser looked like Mr. Clean. He wore a white suit into a cotton mill. He was a big man. He played football at NC State. I walk in, he jumps out of my chair that I was going to eventually be able to sit in, shook my hand with the hugest hand I'd ever shook. He said, Terry, we're proud of you, and we're proud of the things that you're going to do for us here at Cone Mills, and said, I wanted to see you on your first day of work. I said, well, Mr. Moser, I appreciate it. He said, but I got a question for you. He said, what do you think will make you be able to be successful here at Cone Mills? And I thought a second, and I said, well, Mr. Moser, I said, here at Cliffside, I think it'll be because I know everybody. I grew up here. I know the grandparents of the friends I had growing up, and they work here. I know their parents, and I know them, and we're all working together now. Mr. Moser looked at me, and he said, that's pretty good. And he said, but let me tell you one thing. And I said, what's that? He said, there'll be a day coming in your future if you do what we think you're going to do that you'll regret you know a single person in this plant. And he was prophetic because I'll tell you about that day a little bit later. I want to start out talking about the good old days. Mark has on a pair of shrink-to-fit 501 jeans. I know because I called him today to fact check one of the things I had in the slide. He didn't answer his phone. Called me back in about 2 or 3 minutes. He said, I'm sorry I couldn't get to my phone. I got my 501 jeans on, and they're so tight I can't get my phone out of my pocket. The story behind the 501 jeans, and I pick it up in 1984, is that 501 jeans were invented by Levi Strauss, and the way that they came about was the cowboys had previously worn jeans that were made out of canvas. And Levi Strauss started making them. They complained about riding in the saddle all day. It rubber blister on the rear end. And so Levi Strauss knew that denim fabric made out of cotton was softer. So he started making jeans out of denim fabric. He also knew that cotton shrunk. So what he did is he would sell a pair of jeans to a cowboy. They would put those jeans on. They would go sit down in a trough of water, stand up, let them dry, and they shrunk to fit their body. So that's how the shrink to fit name came about from the 501 jeans. In 1984, Levi did these advertisements during the 1984 Olympics, and the 501 jeans craze caught on. So from 1985 to 1995 is a period of time that we would all that worked there would recognize were our best years. In 1985 to 1995 and beyond, Cone Mills was the only supplier of denim fabric to Levi jeans for the 501 shrink to fit jean. Our plants in Rutherford County, which we had every plant on denim starting in 1992. We converted the Haynes and the Florence plants from corduroy to denim, and we were totally dedicated to Levi denim. Cone Mills, Rutherford County plants produced 88 million linear yards of fabric a year. That 88 million yards of fabric made 55 million pair of jeans, which is kind of fascinating to think about what Rutherford County, the plants here, were responsible for. In reference to the Hayneses growing 9 bales of cotton in their first crop, it takes 45,000 bales of cotton to produce, or 45 million pounds of cotton to produce that, or 45 million bales of cotton to produce those jeans. So that's kind of the big numbers that you go through. We also had, at the end of 1995 was our largest employment time, and we had 2,150 people working in the Rutherford County plants, and those were the best people in the world that we had working for us. Our annual payroll was over $76 million. We participated in the United Way of Rutherford County. Our people would contribute over $200,000, and with our corporate gift, we gave over $250,000 to Rutherford County United Way. Our people, we usually had 100% given, and we usually had 95% and higher fair share givers, with fair share giving being 1 hour's pay per month to equate to the fair share gift. We also participated in the March of Dimes and Cancer Relay for Life, and we delivered about 45 to 50 meals per day to the senior citizens in the community to help out with their needs. We were big partners with Cliffside Elementary School. We started a lunch school buddy program before there was a mentor program in the community that we now have with the McNair Foundation. We assisted with many projects at Cliffside Elementary School. Buddy Weathers sitting on the front row that was our HR manager. His son, Mike Weathers, was our maintenance department manager. Mr. White actually would ask Mike to do a project. Mike would come speak to me, and I'd say, how much is it going to cost? And Mike go get the number and come back and tell me. And I said, well, go ahead and do it. Well, it got to be, I just told him, I said, just put a line item in the budget for Mr. White, and you go do whatever it is, and just tell me at the end how much it costs. And he kept them busy. If you've ever been to Cliffside and see all the rock work that's around there, Mr. White got Mr. Cheetah Lipscomb to just about lay every rock that's down there that was done after the mill village was disbanded. Also, Cliffside Thanksgiving meal was started, thanks to Buddy and to Mr. White. We gave away turkeys one Thanksgiving, had some left over. Buddy told Mr. White about it. Mr. White said, well, let's bring them to the school and we'll get the lunchroom staff to cook the turkeys, and let's invite the people from the community. So we did that, and it was a huge turnout, and we did that for, I guess, close to 20 years after that we kept doing that every year. I want to give you a little statistics about Rutherford County Textiles at 1995 to kind of show you the decline that takes place over time. In 1995, Cone was the largest employer in the community, over 2,000 people, 2,150 like I said. Collins and Aikman, or Mastercraft, was number 3, over 1,000 people. Stonecutter was number 4, over 1,000. National Textiles was 5th, over 500 people. J.C. Cowan 7th, over 500. New Cherokee or Spindale Mills was 9th. And out of the top 10 employers in Rutherford County, 6 of them were textiles. What happened? What created a decline for the textile industry? Well, for us, part of it was Levi. As good as they were for the period of the early 80s until 1995, beginning in 1996, they started to have problems. They had internal issues. They had saturated the market with the 501 jeans. And bigger than that, young people didn't want to wear what their parents wore. And their parents were wearing 501 jeans and Docker fabrics and things like that. So they started turning to different kind of fabrics, and Levi's started to have a real decline in their business between 1996 and 1999, and we started to feel the impact of it. NAFTA, North American Free Trade Agreement. Most everybody wants to blame everything on NAFTA, but NAFTA was just one of several things that influenced the decline of the textile industry. NAFTA was free trade between Canada, the U.S., and Mexico, with Mexico being where most people went and started to participate to get access to cheaper labor and close to the markets. Walmart and discounters, and this is where the pressure from NAFTA came from. These large companies influenced the government and politicians to do something such as NAFTA, to be able to get it to where they could bring the cheaper products in and sell them and be able to take over the market share and also to be able to become as profitable as they could. So Walmart was a big contributor along with some others. I'll tell you a quick story too. In the early 80s, I attended with Cohen a conference and had an economist speaking at it that came from Wake Forest University. And he told us in the early 80s that, and at that time there were about 19 to 21 large discount stores such as Walmart. If you remember Rose's, J.M. Fields, you can name them all off. He predicted in the early 80s, and he said, by the time we get to the mid-90s, and definitely by the turn of the century, there'll be anywhere from 2 to 4 large stores that are going to lead this nation. And he said 2 of them will be Walmart and Target. I've never forgotten what that guy predicted, how true it came as the way it's happened. And lastly, our own company. In the mid-90s, we had a turnover in leadership that put us in a position that they wanted to take a different direction and not concentrate on denim, which we were totally dedicated to in Rutherford County. And interest was put into finishing operations and other things that would diversify what we made and supposedly help us go through the difficult times. It took money away from investing in denim, which we could have used and maybe have prolonged our existence, and quickly created the demise of Cohen Mills. So all of those factors influenced what led to be one of Rutherford County's most severe periods of seeing what happened to employment starting in 1999. In February of 1999, Dan River or Spindale Mills or New Cherokee closed. And it impacted, at that time, 150 people that were left before they were completely closed. J.C. Cowan closed their doors, and it was in March of 1999. And it's 450 Burlington employees that were impacted by the closing of J.C. Cowan with Mike over here. These are just a little clips about what is to come. Those all led to the closing of the Cliffside yarn plant and the Florence yarn manufacturing, and impacted 450 people, or impacted 438 people. Stonecutter closes its doors, and that happened in July 1999. That impacted 700 people. We had another reduction in October of 1999, and we had a layoff of 180 people, bringing the total job losses in 1999 to 2,380 jobs. In 2000, after all the changes in 99, Cohen was still over 1,000 people, was the second largest employer in the county. Collins and Aikman, or Mastercraft, was still number 3 with over 1,000. National Textiles was 4, at over 500. Instead of 6 of the 10 being textiles, 3 of the 10 were textiles. What happened when China joined the WTO? And China was the last thing that impacted the big decline in the textile industry. In April of 26, we announced that we would be downsizing with layoffs of 50 to 60 people, and this impacted Cliffside, Florence, and Haynes. In August of 2021, we closed the Florence plant and had layoffs at Cliffside and Haynes that affected 392 people. And I always remember after this closing, there's 2 things in my generation you always remember. You always remember where you were when John F. Kennedy was assassinated. You always remember where you were on 9/11. On 9/11 of 2001, I was going to Far City to talk to Chuck Summey and tell him that we had decided to sell the Florence plant to make them aware of what our plans were. And I pulled up to the J.C. Cowan exit and stopped, and David Aker called me on the phone. He said, "Where you at?" And I said, "Headed to Far City." And he said, "There's been planes crashing into the World Trade Center in New York, and we don't know what's going on." So I got to Far City and stood around a little small, probably 18-inch screen with about 20 people from the town of Far City watching all that. And I told Chuck, "I'll come back later and talk to you about what was going on." Next thing that happened, Wilbur Ross. I don't know how many of you remember that name, but Wilbur Ross became Secretary of Commerce for Donald Trump when he became president in 2016. Prior to that, we got to know Mr. Ross because he was going to purchase our company out of bankruptcy, and did that in 2003. After that, then in December of 2003, we closed the Cliffside finishing and the Haynes plants, along with reducing the workforce at Cliffside Weaving, which took out 625 jobs. And then the last thing for us is that in November of 2005, we closed our wheat plant, and that impacted 200 jobs. Other areas that were impacted in 2004 and 2005, Parkdale at Caroline closed, which was the old Caroline Burlington plant, closed with 100 people. In February of 2004, National Textiles laid off 106 people. In December of 2004, Manual Woodworkers closed due to relocation. That impacted 153 people. And in September of 2005, Mastercraft laid off 115 people. That moved us to 2006 for Rutherford County Textiles. The 5th largest employer in 2006 was National Textiles, with over 500 people left employed there. Only one of the top 10 employers in Rutherford County was Textiles, and National Textiles closed in 2008. I want to go back and tell you the story about what Mr. Moser shared with me, and how you would face the day when you didn't want to know anybody in the area that you were working. When we made the announcements at the Cliffside yarn plant in 1999, the first group I always spoke to whenever we would do a closing would be the most senior people. So it was always a day crew. Either we run 4 12-hour shifts, so we had A and B were day, and whichever one was on, we'd start with them. So I went down to the yarn plant to speak to the group of people, and we had them all assembled out in the room outside of our card room. It was a big open area. We didn't have a conference room big enough to put that many people in, and started to share with them that we were going to close the yarn plant. And as was said in the little video clip and all, a lot of people had known it and weren't surprised by it. Others had hoped it wasn't going to happen and realized it was coming true, and others were frustrated. But the impact on me was standing very front of the group that I was speaking to was a gentleman by the name of Mr. Frank Holzclaw. Frank had been my Little League coach, and he had worked at that time for us in our spinning room for 44 years, and he was a fixer. And our technicians were our highest paid people. And Frank didn't have a lot of skills that would transfer into other areas of the plant. And when I got through speaking to everybody, he came over to me and he said, "What am I going to do?" And I said, well, let's get through this, and then I'll have the chance to talk and see where we can help you out and get you into what we can. So when we went through all the process of the way we did the job placements, got to a place, Frank went from a technician making the highest wage in our plant to a sweeper in our weave room. He worked 3.5 more years before he retired, and I saw him every day he worked, always said hello, and he never complained one bit. And I can say from the experience there, that is where I thought when I got through how smart Mr. Moser was. And as Mark talked about somebody saying something to you that sticks with you, then that definitely did. I'll say about our people at Cone Mills, and I'm sure this was true at Stonecutter and New Cherokee and every other place in the world, and had the opportunity to work at Tanner and spend a good bit of time there with some great people. But I was always amazed that whenever something such as a United Way campaign or a cancer relay or a March of Dimes, how people were interested and wanting to participate in whatever the activity was. But it really came out whenever you saw someone that had a tragedy. You would wind up that as people went through, and we had a person whose home burned down, you'd think about, well, probably the people they work with will do something and help them out. And that department would start it, but it would spread quickly, and the word would get out. And then all of a sudden, the whole plant was coming together, and it was amazing to see how much stuff was brought in, whether it was food, clothes, money, and that impact happened a lot when you had 2,000 and something people. But the people of Cliffside were great. And what I'd like to do at this time is to thank some people. I want to thank Kathy Webb. I don't know where's Kathy, at the back, and Chivas and the committee that's put this on. Thank Mr. White for joining me tonight to help out with the presentation. Can't go without recognizing my wife, Kathy, and Ellison. Ellison helped us with the presentation from long distance, and of course, Lucas, our son, and then my sister and brother are here. I appreciate them for tolerating me through these periods of time. But most of all, I want to thank all the great people through the years at Cone and in our community that have had such a big impact on my life. And what Mr. White and I'll do, we'll hang around if you want to ask any questions. I want to close things with a little video. I hate to go out as Debbie Downer, if you've heard that term with Saturday Night Live, but this is the old mill at Cliffside and a video of where it was taken, where it was being closed or torn down, and kind of gives you a little bit of a symbolic message of what we've gone through. We'll watch a couple minutes of that. Anybody have any questions or comments? Or as I always ask our people, questions, comments, or complaints? So, well, thank you.